Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. I'm going to try and share my screen now with you. Hopefully this is going to work. How's that? All working?
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so I am going to talk quite fast, I think, if that's all right with everyone, to just sort of quickly run through some recent discoveries at Canterbury Cathedral over the last sort of year and a half or so. So we're starting off with a view, a sort of early evening view of the cathedral from the eastern end. It's normally at this point in person that I'd ask for a show of hands of who's been there, but I'm not going to be able to see that tonight. So I'm going to assume that quite a lot of you have been there. And we'll talk a little bit about the history of the building, but not too much. Canterbury obviously is an incredibly complex building. The cathedral is of many, many phases. There have been quite a lot of fires throughout its lifetime. So bits have burnt down, bits have been rebuilt. And this is the plan of the cathedral, just to give you a quick sort of snapshot of the different phases. So everything from Lanfranc, which is the black coloured archaeology that you can see there. So that's 11th century fabric all the way through to present day. Now, of course, in the present day, we've got rather a different cathedral at the moment. So this photo was taken in June and just shows you the view of the nave with the new, is that still working? No, with the new,
no.
There we go, with the new arrangement of chairs to account for social distancing within the cathedral. The cathedral is now open again to visitors, but obviously some of the things that were planned for this year have been impacted by the pandemic. Now, we had a number of different events and activities that were planned for, oh, now this isn't working. Now that's an interesting one. Give me one moment and let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, so we had a whole series of different events and exhibitions that were planned in commemoration of the anniversary of the martyrdom of Thomas Becket. So as all of you may well know, Thomas Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury in 1170, was very famously martyred in his own cathedral. I'm starting with this image of Thomas here, just to sort of, because this is a talk for the City of London Archaeological Society, just to remind us of that link that Thomas has with London, because he was born in London, and as you can see in the quote on the side there, he's adorned both of these cities, both Canterbury and London. So there's been an enormous amount of research undertaken at Canterbury by a range of different experts and specialists, looking at lots of different aspects of that post-martyrdom expression towards Thomas Becket, largely in the late 12th century rebuilding of the eastern end. So you may have seen in the news the work on the miracle windows by Leonie Sellinger and Rachel Koopmans, which identified the very, very early glass in some of those windows, dating from the immediate aftermath of the martyrdom and the rebuilding in 1174. So here we can see some pilgrims' feet. These wonderful digital reconstructions of the Eastern Arm in around about the 15th century. So these were created by John Jenkins and the University of York to give you the sort of picture of how the shrine looked in its sort of high medieval splendor. And you can see the sort of amazing decoration and the glass in the windows there. John and the University of York's work has also included creating digital reconstructions of the crypt below the Trinity Chapel. This is was the original resting place of the body of Thomas Becket immediately after his murder, and remained a site of pilgrimage. So again, this is a 15th century view of that space reconstructed. So you can see the original tomb there at the bottom. Sorry, in the centre. This is an area that has been the focus of much interest recently through the Canterbury Journey project, where a team of volunteers have been looking at the graffiti in that Eastern Crypt area. It's an area that has been studied for a really, really long time. So we're looking back now towards the wax chamber. So we're looking west, we're in the Eastern Crypt here. And we've got a quote from a Royal Archaeological Institute journal from the late Victorian period, from the 1870s. And it notes these graffiti, or these inscriptions on the walls in that space. So you see to the left of the image where there's a glass screen. Behind that glass screen, we have traced out by shallow lines filled with modern colour our Lord seated in glory and giving the benediction, and surrounded by the emblems of the four evangelists. So these sort of schemes that we can see in the crypt and in other places in the cathedral are not necessarily graffiti as we might understand it, but are possibly to set out wall paintings or decorative elements that are meant to be there. And some of the detail in those is really incredible. So this is one of the evangelist symbols. And I've enjoyed during lockdown having the chance to look at other aspects of cathedral and monastic art and expression. So I'll be looking quite a lot at illuminated manuscripts. And this is a manuscript, it's called the Aberdeen Bestiary, and it dates to around 1200. And these are just a couple of eagles from that manuscript, which caught my eye in comparison with the eagle that we've just seen on the wall. Canterbury Cathedral there's no, I'm not being excessive to say it's a building that is covered in historic graffiti of all kinds and of all periods. Now, of course, we are interested mainly in the older, but there's that interesting question about when does graffiti become interesting? What's an appropriate date to be interested historically in graffiti and thinking of it a bit versus thinking of it as vandalism? But what we can see is that there is a really large amount of medieval inscribed material on the walls at the cathedral, including text, and it also including a number of depictions of people. And this one is in the North Choir aisle. And again, just coming to as a manuscript illustration, this was shared by my colleague Alison Ray, who is the assistant archivist in the Library and Archives. And it's fascinating to think about, which is inspiring which in these kinds of places. Are people reading things in books and then scratching them on the walls, or are they scratching them on the walls in preparation for writing them in books, for example? There are lots of different reasons, obviously, that people leave graffiti, but it's lovely to see these possible links. The illustration we were just looking at that Alison had posted from the archive collection was a musical text, and we have a really fantastic, obviously, history of music at the cathedral and history of playing, and some recent work in the former organ loft. So the pulpitum screen right in the centre of the cathedral, under the floorboards in that space, was found this, along with a whole load of sort of service books and tickets and lots of things were found under the floorboards there. And if you've heard about Oxburgh Hall this week for the National Trust, you'll know that looking under floorboards is a very well, underfloor archaeology is a good thing, we think. We obviously found that at Knoll as well. So this is just a little detail of a recent find made by the Archives and Library team under the floorboards at the pulpitum loft. And this was where the organ was, where the organ loft was. So this is where people were gathering in order to, play the music for the cathedral. So it's lovely to see these little details. This is probably 19th century. So we talked a little bit already about graffiti and why it is accepted and acceptable in certain contexts. But the cathedral is clearly aware that there is, how should we term this, a challenge around historic graffiti in their places. And this sign, which is in the library Undercroft corridor, is actually a collection item now within itself. So not only is the graffiti part of the historic fabric, but also the sign asking people not to graffiti is also part of the historic fabric. Alongside the graffiti, people have also been looking for many, many years at the evidence for masons within the building and how the building has been put together by looking at the masons' marks. So all the way back in 1844, at the inaugural summer meeting of the Royal Archaeological Institute and the British Archaeological Association, we have a paper read by Mr. Godwin on certain marks of the masons, which he had observed on the stonework of various churches abroad and at home, many of which he'd also recognised in Canterbury Cathedral. We have a very long and proud history at the cathedral of trying to understand these scratches from the past and what that tells us about those who are both visiting and working and living in these spaces. There's been a fantastic piece of work undertaken by Canterbury Archaeological Trust over the last couple of years, funded by the Friends of Canterbury Cathedral. This is a plan, sort of a reflected ceiling plan of the nave vaults, so the area above your head when you go into the main body of the church. And a survey by Canterbury Archaeological Trust, led by Rupert Austin, has mapped every single mason's mark on the nave vaults, which, as you can see, is an astonishing piece of work. And just drawing on some of Rupert's conclusions here, we've got some text taken from his report down the side. So we have an understanding of the possible numbers of individual people who were working in these spaces in a relatively short time frame. We've got an understanding of the process of work, so where people were working, so looking at the different marks and trying to work out who was focused in different areas and how the works proceeded, so seeing which marks appear in different parts of the building. And finally, one of the most exciting observations that was made by Rupert and his team was the fact that we have quite a lot of reused masonry in these spaces. So a number of the stones were double marked. They had an original mason's mark from the 12th century construction of the nave, and then a secondary mark where they'd been recycled and reused at upper levels in the new nave vaulting in the 14th and 15th century. So, and this is a spectacularly detailed piece of work and is a really amazing record, and also means that we can start looking at work that is taking place on high and work that is taking place at ground level and see if we can start matching some of those marks. So Rupert's work and Canterbury Archaeological Trust work has been significant across the nave at roof spaces as part of the Canterbury Journey, which is a £25 million Heritage Lottery funded project, which has been running for about 3.5 years now. So they've been looking in detail at the nave roof, at the construction details, at clerestory level, and also looking at how we sort of conserve the building, so replacement of stonework where it is failing, replacement of timber work where it is failing, and also looking at how the building we can try and future-proof it. So in some cases, future-proofing the building, in this case, providing rainwater goods that will cope better with much heavier flows, is a return to the earlier medieval arrangements. So this piece that we're looking at here is a new installation for water coming off the cathedral roof, but is based on the fragments that were found during Rupert's work recording at clerestory level. And here you can see the replacement that gargoyle on the right has replaced. So on the left-hand side, you have what was there, which is a mixture of surviving fragmentary medieval arrangements and 18th century lead hoppers, which were sort of not catching enough water, shall we say. So just to give you an idea of the scale of the works here, if you come to Canterbury now, you will see a building that is covered in scaffolding as its western part. This is very similar to what pilgrims in Chaucer's tale would have seen when they were embarking or reaching the end of their own Canterbury journey. So that the construction of the nave in the medieval period was at about the same time as Chaucer was writing the Canterbury Tales. So the Canterbury Journey is an appropriate name for such an enormous project. As well as all of the work to the building, the Canterbury Archaeological Trust, and here you can see Francis Morgan at the right of this picture, have been excavating in the precincts and in the landscape. The final piece of work for this phase has just completed, so they have just finished work under the Christchurch Gate, which is the last little piece of the jigsaw this time. Moving on at the Christchurch Gate, we'll be undergoing a programme of conservation repairs, so looking at the standing external fabric of the building. So here we're looking at an 18th century view from the interior. So the cathedral is behind us and we're looking to the gate at the front. And it's nice that we're seeing this sort of snapshot of activities in the 1760s in this picture from the archives by Grimm. So we can see some stonemasons to the right, and obviously walking your dog in the cathedral precincts was a popular activity. So just to give you an idea of the scale of the landscaping works, all of the area coloured beige, the existing paving has been lifted and new paving has been installed. There's also been a programme of facilities work, so looking at drainage, looking at boreholes, looking at electricity and routing. The white area to the bottom is the new welcome centre, which is now open. So all of that area has also been excavated. And just to give you a sort of comparative scale, the red area in the image there is the area that was excavated during the 1990s nave works. So it's a very, very large project underway at the moment. And it is quite, it's quite disruptive. When you come to Canterbury, it does look like a building site. So for an archaeologist, that's quite exciting. We are finding all kinds of interesting things. Now, time precludes talking about them in any detail, so we're just going to look at a couple of small finds. This is a bread token, so similar to the sorts of things that Thames mudlarkers are finding on the foreshores. This is a 17th century token. And this is also a late 16th, early 17th century jeton. So it's a Nuremberg jeton of Hans Krawinkel, and the legend on it reads very appropriately, God's kingdom endures forever. So we obviously have a wealth of archive material to draw on to help us to understand the structures that are being revealed during this process of excavation. So around that, with the sort of western end of the cathedral, we are excavating parts of the now vanished earlier Archbishop's Palace, which you can see to the left of the image on the screen there, which is held in the Bodleian Library and dates from around from 1683. So we can see how parts of the precincts were being used in the past, and also parts of the archiepiscopal holdings, as well as the main monastic community and the precincts around. Moving on to other projects fairly quickly. This is a project within the cloisters. As you can see, the proposal is to install a lift platform to enable people to have easier access into the north door of the cathedral. And you can see exposed there to the right of the image, a surviving medieval tile pavement being excavated by Dana Goodburn-Brown and her assistant Emma Norton from the Cathedral Conservation Team, and Jess from Canterbury Archaeological Trust. So within a very, very small stratigraphic unit, so less than 500 millimeters of soil, we have quite a complex sequence from the Victorian period all the way back to the Anglo-Saxon period. In amongst those medieval tiles of that floor that we were looking at earlier is this beautiful pilgrim's tile, a similar example here shown on the left, found in Bedfordshire. These are a Tyler Hill manufacturer, and the interesting thing about them is that they don't quite match the dates of the construction of the architecture around them. So they are either an earlier floor surviving in situ, or they are recycled tiles from somewhere else in the building that have been relayed into the cloister after the 14th century. And this is a bit of Anglo-Saxon archaeology. So underneath the tiles, the team from CAT came down almost immediately onto this Anglo-Saxon foundation. So this is part of the northwest tower of the cathedral in the Anglo-Saxon period. So the red area here was excavated in the nave in the 1990s, and you can see they have a similar tower to the southwest. Earlier excavations have picked up parts of it on the northwest. Our excavations are just here. So you can see that almost anywhere you put a spade to the earth at Canterbury, of course, you are going to find very exciting archaeology and very significant archaeology. It's very, very exciting to see this early medieval evidence of a now vanished building being exposed. So for the final couple of slides, we're going to move away from the main cathedral building. So we've been talking about work in the cathedral church here, work in the landscape and at the Christ Church gate, work in the cloister just there. Now we're going to move down to the north, which is confusing because north is currently to the bottom in this image, and talk about some work underway by the Canterbury Archaeological Trust within the King's School. So they are building a new science block at the King's School. They've taken down a 1980s building, and this is the excavation, open area excavation that is currently underway right behind the remains of the 12th century buildings you can see to the rear of the picture there. This area was formerly the Almonry Chapel and the Almonry Yard, and where they're excavating here, they found an incredible sequence of archaeology, some of the most amazing stratigraphy that I've seen in Canterbury so far. So the darker layers that you can see there at the top are obviously the latest, and these are the medieval layers that have come down on top of all of the earlier archaeology. And you can see really clearly, I hope, some nice pit cuts through this earlier stratigraphy here. So medieval archaeology, again, early medieval archaeology as well, so Anglo-Saxon archaeology coming down onto a really substantial Roman road running right across the area of their site, which is all sitting on top of a paleo channel. So they're currently working in the very wet prehistoric deposits. So an earlier watercourse that ran across this site in the pre-Roman period. So standing on a Roman road, which I did a few weeks ago, was an extremely exciting experience. So I have come to the end of my slides for this evening. So we've just got some acknowledgements here to my cathedral colleagues, to Joe Deeming, the surveyor to the fabric, and his colleague Leanne Harter, to all of the wonderful team at the Canterbury Archaeological Trust, and to the external experts that we've been working with over the last few years on a whole range of different projects. So I will finish there, and if there are any questions, please do ask away.